All right, today is Sunday, April 26th, 2020, and this is episode 250 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me tonight, as always, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Good evening, sir. How are you tonight?
I am great, but it is a crazy, crazy time in the history of humanity. I will say that.
I think it's kind of, when I take a step back and I, pull myself out of the doldrums of depression and anxiety, it is pretty fascinating to watch something so historic happen live in our own life.
Absolutely. It's a really, it's interesting and terrifying and absolutely devastating all all in one. But I hope everybody is safe and well, and your loved ones are well, and whatnot, and that you are you're getting through this okay. So,
indeed.
Anyhow, just a reminder that the thoughts and opinions on this show are ours and do not represent those of our employers. However, for the correct number of zeros, which probably has to be 8 or 9, they could be your opinions too.
No, I'm cheaper than you. I'd do 7.
Okay, well,
I mean, depending on where the decimal is, I guess we should define that.
Good point. Yeah. That's a good point. All right, let's go ahead and get into some stories. So you had one that you wanted to talk about before we get into the organized portion of the show.
Yeah, just a quick aside that kind of came up late to my notes. There was an interesting potential exploit that came out by some security researchers at a company called ZecOps, Z-E-C Ops. I don't really know them, don't know anything about them, but they said that they had found a vulnerability in iOS in the mail client that was potentially a zero-click complete exploit. And there was just enough ambiguity about it. I was kind of, not sure about this one, but it certainly was a big deal if somebody had found that. But then Apple came out a couple of days later and said, no, we don't think so. We haven't been able to reproduce it. We haven't seen a working POC. Don't think it's real.
So you might say it was fake news.
Well, I don't know. But I think the takeaway for me is sometimes big press exploits aren't real or aren't what we might think. So sometimes we've got to wait and see how the story develops before we knee-jerk our reaction on them. So I thought it was just an interesting one. It's kind of rare where you see big press come out, and then it's not rare for a company to dispute it, and not rare for a company to say, try to obfuscate the situation. Apple's usually pretty good about it, but in this case, it looks like, and the story's still playing out, but it looks like whatever the ZecOps folks found isn't being reproduced by Apple and may not be real. So I don't know. But then again, I saw another thing where ZecOps said that, or somebody on the press said that Apple was introducing a patch for it in a forthcoming beta. So who knows? But it was a weird enough one that I figure I just mentioned as a takeaway of always be a little skeptical and always try to, trust but verify when these things come out.
Well, so I guess I should not have smashed my iPhone with a hammer then.
No, sorry.
Yeah,
but
ripes. All right. Well, live and learn. Okay, so our first story, other than the breaking news, comes from ZDNet, and the title is DHS CISA. Companies are getting hacked even after patching Pulse Secure VPNs. Wow.
But Jerry, they're patched. How could they still be getting?
They're totally patched. They're patched.
So I don't understand.
It's obviously fake news. We'll move on.
Okay then.
So this is by the way one of the really I think unspoken problems we have in our industry when we have some sort of a significant 0 day that's known to be exploited, simultaneous or maybe before most organizations have applied the patch. It can provide an opportunity for for some adversaries to establish a beachhead that doesn't go away after the vulnerability is patched. And I think a lot of organizations that I've seen, at least, and certainly, this seems to be in concert with what DHS is saying, that this is a real problem. And so the story here is back last year, and I think we talked about it at the time. Pulse Secure is a big VPN provider. I think it's technology that's kind of baked into a number of different types of VPNs in addition to their own.
Yeah, it's pretty widely used. That's for sure.
Had a really significant a vulnerability that was actively being exploited by multiple different actors. And what DHS is pointing out here is that they're seeing clear evidence that there are some actors who had used the access, used the vulnerability at the time to collect credentials, which allowed them to retain access through the VPN even after the VPN had been patched. So basically they collected some credentials while the VPN concentrator was vulnerable. After the VPN concentrator was patched, those same credentials allowed access through the VPN, and bing bang boom, the bad guys are still able to have access to the network. And this is a difficult situation, right? Because at some level we don't have access, or we don't have the resources, I should say, to roll incident response every time we have to patch some sort of 0 day. And so there is an art form around figuring out what, when you need to do that. Now, for their part, the CSA and actually JP-Cert had released some code on GitHub, which will help let you parse your Pulse Secure logs to see if there's any evidence that people are or had been compromised, or you have been attacking your VPN concentrator. But at this point, if you had already patched it, it's probably been so long that you may not even have the logs anymore. And
if they've gathered a bunch of credentials, it doesn't mean they have to come back against the VPN concentrator either. They could be looking for OpenRDP. They could be looking for web portals that are using AD credentials, or anything else exposed to the internet, or somebody reusing a password. So there's a whole bunch of, or
put in rats, there's lots and lots and lots of different ways of maintaining persistence. And once they're in, it's kind of off to the races, and that there are many different ways of doing that.
So I guess this argues for really good post-breach forensics, for breach detection, breach forensics, to understand what exactly they did, so you can identify what they might have captured or where they might have, put a beachhead or something.
But that's the issue here, right? So if you think of yourself, just consider that you're an organization that has one of these Pulse Secure VPNs, and you have your normal patch process says, I'm pretty sure this was a high severity patch, right? Your normal process says that we have to patch a high severity thing on the internet within a week or 2 weeks, right? You have no indication at the time that you were hacked, right?
Yeah, you would have to have some other detection mechanism that triggered somehow if you got lucky.
And I think that's the issue is that, so organizations just applied the patch completely ignorant of the fact, or possible fact, that somebody actually used the use the vulnerability to compromise the organization. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying. It's kind of impractical to run some sort of incident response. After every time you patch a flaw on your on your VPN concentrator or your web server. But on the other hand, is it irresponsible not to? And
well, I think if it's a high value internet facing device, I think the appropriate thing to do is try to find some IOCs of behavior on that device that indicated potential exploitation, if possible.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it goes back to the point you really need to have enough visibility in your organization to hopefully detect things that get through, right? Because you can't count on your defenses being perfect. So you really have,
especially when an O-Day pops by no fault of your own.
Right. You have to have some ability to see what's going on, and recognize that you have an issue that you have to go investigate.
And some people might say, well, run multiple vendors. But
so what are you going to do? Have them VPN into Pulse Secure, and then they have to VPN into,
Well, no, it's more like assume that one of your vendors gets popped with an O-Day, being able to switch to another vendor quickly.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But that's costly. And, back in the day, it was really trendy to run two different vendors for firewalls. And you would sandwich, a checkpoint in front of a Cisco or whatever, just picking on two vendors. But what I think they found in most studies, and please don't quote me on this because I'm not sure I'm correct, but I think I remember that when someone's trying to run two different vendors, they run neither of them well because they don't necessarily have the same level of expertise. So you're more likely to make mistakes and such. But I don't know. Maybe things have changed.
It certainly seems intuitive, right? It
doesn't mean it's accurate.
But it doesn't mean it's accurate. But it is a different. The underlying principles are the same, but the implementation is different enough that you probably don't have the resources to have experts in both.
And that's where people get bit, is they usually don't run really good security tools properly, and then they get, they have problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a tough one, though. That is a tough one.
But I think it goes back to two things. One is it points out the ongoing need for defense in depth, and then also the extreme need for visibility tools. Logging and the ability to detect anomalous things happening to detect, and then also to react to anomalous things happening in your network. So there you go. Next story comes from bankinfosecurity.com. And the title is Attackers Increasingly Use Web Shells to Create Backdoors.
It's a kind of a backdoor featured episode today.
It really is. Yeah.
Or persistent access episode.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. I like that.
You know what I have persistent access to?
Oh my God.
I was just going to say my computer.
Your cats?
Sure. They're in quarantine with me.
Your office?
My office.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, deal here is, and I will say, I have seen this. I can independently corroborate the information here. We've talked about over the years, right? The tactics, the prevailing tactics used by adversaries, are a push and pull. It sloshes around like water in a bucket. Attacks rarely completely move away. For a long time, we were almost exclusively attacking endpoints. It's what we were seeing. Attacks were very, very heavily focused on endpoints because that's where, the easy money was. It was really easy to fish people, and it was really easy to establish a presence on Workstation, blah, 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 right? But, for probably a variety of reasons, we're seeing the water in the bucket starting to slosh back the other way, where it makes sense for adversaries to be attacking, infrastructure components again. And, whether that's, by the way, web servers or things like RDP and VPN servers even. But web shells, web shells is a, it's not an exploit per se, right? It's not an attack technique. It's post-exploitation.
Well, it's a payload you drop.
It's a payload you drop, right? It relies on some other issue in the environment to take advantage of. But unfortunately, a lot of these, web applications in particular have vulnerabilities that are exploitable, and it doesn't, it's the kind of vulnerability. It doesn't look so awful, right? I mean, because most of the times this is a remote file inclusion or a file upload vulnerability. They aren't. It's not like it's a 0-day, remote root exploit. It's quite often the ability to upload a file and then be able to run that file, and then then that provides the the beachhead, and it is the window into the organization. And I've seen this happen over and over and over and over again. It's a very common tactic, and I think it's becoming more. The point here is the NSA and the Australian Signals Directorate, which is their version of the NSA, are warning organizations that this tactic is on the increase, and they're pointing out that you really ought to be aware of this and take precautions. They do point out that the number one defense is patching. Now, patching, not necessarily, your web server itself, like IIS or Apache or Nginx or whatever. It's patching the web applications like WordPress and, SharePoint and Confluence and Jira and all of the thundering herd of other web applications that we run. It's kind of like when you compromise a workstation. You drop a remote access Trojan. When you compromise a web server, sometimes you can drop a remote access Trojan, but the better way is you just put a web shell on. And
the interesting thing about web shells is it blends in with all the other traffic.
It does, and it it not only blends in with the other traffic, but it kind of blends in with the rest of the web application. And that goes to the some of the points of the advice here is that you really ought to be implementing what I would describe as file integrity monitoring on your web applications. They describe it in a slightly different way, and they actually, they have another GitHub repository, if in fact you trust the NSA.
No, man, no, no. Here's what you do. You virtualize it, and what you do is you destroy it every 30 seconds and rebuild it in a fresh image.
Can we do that on Kubernetes?
I can do it on drugs.
Okay, good.
Is that the same thing?
Yes. Okay. No. No. It's not nothing like that. No.
But no, in all seriousness, FIM makes sense, but there are also some that are just a memory. So you might miss those.
Correct. Yes.
But still not a bad, you'll catch the majority, right? I mean, don't give it up because you might miss an edge case.
Yeah. So I will tell you, my friend Bob, right?
How is Bob? Is he surviving quarantine?
He's getting by. Yeah.
I heard he had COVID-20, which I was very concerned by, but he is ahead of his time.
Right. Well, he's always been the hipster, right? So
before it's cool.
Right. He's got to have the new thing before it's cool.
All right, I distracted. Carry on.
No. So anyway, my friend Bob, was telling me about an incident he recently worked on, where there was complete environment compromise, right? Just total environment compromise, and in the ensuing investigation, Bob found that it was actually a web shell. So that the adversary had uploaded a web shell through a flaw in the web application. And that, of course, it was an IIS server that was Active Directory domain joined, and it was awesome, right? It was awesome.
Out of curiosity, how did Bob detect the web shell's presence?
Well, after everything had been burned down, like that, when they basically, the internals of this organization's network were completely compromised, right? So through analyzing system and kind of tracing it back, they ended up on this web server and identified web shell, and through further analysis, they figured out that that was the initial point of entry. But what was most problematic from Bob's perspective was it took 3 days for the adversary to get the web shell to run, because antivirus on the web server kept catching it and cleaning it.
Brilliant!
Until they managed to modify the web shell in just such a way that antivirus didn't catch it. And
question for you. I understand that we're still evolving antivirus technology, but I understand also that some bleeding edge antivirus technologies have the ability to send alerts and logs to a centralized console when it detects and cleans malicious software.
Yes, that was that was actually the thing that Bob was most angry about, and he was quite angry, in fact, that no one apparently had been actually watching the antivirus logs, and he went further to say, if you have a web server, if you have a non-interactively used system, and by that I mean like there isn't somebody with hands on keyboard, checking their email and crap like that on a server, you really should be quite surprised and alarmed if antivirus on that system detects anything.
Well, that's true. I mean, you should. I mean, AVs do trigger false positives from time to time.
Right. But if nobody's uploading stuff, then the system is relatively static.
Things get patched.
Things do get patched.
Hopefully.
Absolutely.
Hopefully.
From time to time they get patched. But
yeah, I mean, you sure as heck should be investigating.
Yeah. So it was a lost opportunity there, but again, I think it kind of goes back to what the NSA and the ASD are pointing out here, that you really ought to be looking for unexpected changes in the content and composition of your web applications. They actually go further, and they provide guidance if you go into their GitHub repository about how to configure on a Linux server auditd and on a Windows server sysmon, and basically they do really what I think is a pretty nice job of explaining how to detect things that are indicative that a web shell is there, and and there's things that are they have some ideas that are going to be more noisy than others. It's always a trade-off, right? But I will say that I am seeing the same sort of the same problem that they're pointing out becoming more common, and so it makes sense. And the reason I wanted to bring this up, it makes sense for us to to pay attention to this, make sure that we're our our massive security operation centers that we all have, of course, are properly attuned to this. I kid about that, right? But you don't need a huge SOC, right, to be able to detect something, an alert that should probably never trip. But I will also say, as we saw with Equifax again, you want to test it every now and then to make sure it works.
Well, you've also got this problem of alert fatigue, and
absolutely.
If you're not spending the time to tune your tools, if you don't have the resources available to really tune it and really make it hum so people believe and trust it, they're going to ignore the alerts and they're going to filter them out.
That is very true. And I think we saw that was one of the big issues with Target, which was even farther or even longer ago, right?
Yeah, that was back when the dinosaurs roamed the internet.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say the dinosaurs. I was thinking more of the little yellow yield sign with the guy with the shovel and the hard hat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the marquee.
I was thinking, you remember flying toasters and how popular they were? How big of a deal it was?
I do. And the singing toilets. Yes.
Yeah. Well, yep, we're old. Oh, my God, we're old.
People are like, what the hell are they talking about?
No, you think people listen?
Not voluntarily.
Fair. That's fair. That is, yeah.
So anyway, last story for today comes from bleepingcomputer.com, and the title is Doppelpaymer ransomware hits Los Angeles County City, leaks files. So Doppelpaymer, which I think Paymer has been around for a while, is now on the bus with Maze and Sodinokibi and a bunch of others who are now not only encrypting your files but also actually stealing them, downloading them and then threatening and actually apparently carrying through to upload them and make them available if you don't pay the ransom. So this is a story about the city of Torrance in the Los Angeles area. They were infected by Doppelpaymer, and the ransom was pretty high, 100 bitcoins, which is almost $700,000 at the time the story was written. And I don't believe the city paid, and so the information was in fact posted on a website. I think it was over 200 gigabytes of data, which the city claims didn't have any sensitive information. I don't know how. Maybe they downloaded it and analyzed it and figured that was actually true. I don't know, but 200 gigabytes of stuff is certainly a lot to be able to say that there's no personal data in the mix. But and also, by the way, there's really no indication how this attack happened. Although I will say, as we've talked about in the past, there's a fairly defined set of entry points for these kinds of things, right? The specific way they progress once they're in an organization can vary. Some of them are hand tailored to move around in an organization. Some of them are a little more automated. I don't know where this one falls in the spectrum, but it's almost certainly going to be one of the common, phishing, RDP, password brute forcing or password reuse, or heck, maybe even a web shell. Which, by the way, I have seen a ransomware attack launched through a web shell, so it's not unheard of. Wasn't one of these, but yeah. So I think the thing that I really wanted to relay here is that this is becoming the main mode of operation for most of the organized ransomware gangs now, right?
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a couple of shows. and predicting this sort of starting to happen more often, where they're going to leak stuff.
Right. And so we've talked in the past, ransomware has been a problem for quite a long time. And the prescriptive mitigation was always, well, make sure you have good backups and whatnot. That's really, obviously that's still very important for a lot of different reasons, only one of which is ransomware. But if you really don't want your data to be published on the internet, it's no longer sufficient, right? It's not. Backups aren't going to help you with that. Now, backups, by the way, will help you, and I have seen this be useful too. Backups will help you gain some confidence with what was taken, right? So, if you end up knowing where the adversary was, where and when, you can use, if you've got backups, you can actually figure out, well, what data did they potentially have access to, and figure out what kinds of records were in that set of data. Which is useful. You can tell what color the horse was after it escaped the barn. But that does, it can certainly help in the case of like HIPAA or some of the other data privacy regulations. But this really gets back to the point that we have to start focusing a lot more back on kind of core, back to basics, core security, core hygiene. Like we gotta, we not only have to make sure we gotta redouble efforts to make sure they're not getting in. We also have to make sure that they're not able to get stuff out.
Well, this is something that we talk about a lot, which is, I really do feel in general that a lot of security leaders get distracted by shiny new toys and fun, sexy edge cases and playing, cyber James Bond instead of the boring blocking and tackling of asset management, patching, segmentation, and proper network design and detection, and EDR, and running a SOC properly and tuning your logs properly, and having competent incident responders. I think a lot of executives get caught up in stuff that is, in general, useful once you've mastered the basics, and they want to skip the boring basics.
Yeah, the basics. I think your point is the basics aren't sexy, which is true. They're really not,
and that's why
but they're critically important.
Video, and that's why there's not a video of this podcast, because neither am I.
I can so relate to that.
I'm also not critically important, but the basics in cyber hygiene are.
Yeah, well, I think you're important. I do.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Jerry. I'm so glad that you could ride my coattails to your success.
Absolutely. Thank you
or something.
Thank you, by the way, for that.
I don't know if that's how that worked out, but
anyway, it's all good.
Anyway, yeah. Huh.
So if they give some. Actually, the previous story gave the advice. This article is totally devoid of any advice at all. So,
also important to point out, the organization that was attacked has not confirmed it.
Good point. But the data is posted.
Yeah.
So,
but it could potentially be fake data. It's unlikely. It's incredibly unlikely. But just for the record, there has been no confirmation that this organization, from the organization or law enforcement, that this organization was indeed ransomwared.
Touche. So the way, yes, that they have not confirmed, right?
But we'll just assume it's accurate and true.
The way that it's come to be known is that BitPaymer has this website where they've indicated they're going to disclose data of their victims, and there is in fact a page labeled City of Torrance, California. So
they have a known track record, and much like my love for you, it is consistent and dependable.
Wow.
Look,
anyway.
man, I've been quarantined for like a year and a half. So
that's true. I actually feel for you, man. Like, that's crappy. You had December, right? You had like
no, I had surgery again in December.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So you had like part of January.
I had January and February. Yeah, a little bit of February. That's okay. Look, I'm not bitching. Look, I was mostly dead last year, so I'm just happy to be alive, and I've gotten real good at just entertaining myself at home.
Good
My
deal.
wife, on the other hand, is hating it with a passion, and I feel bad for her. So
I understand.
I mean, she's stuck with me. First off, that's oof,
I understand.
me.
Anyhow,
I know. Just completely took us off the rails.
This is here's the crazy one of the crazy things that there is very little, I think, in very little hope for like a solution, a security solution to the, like a point solution, because we've seen a lot of a lot of innovation in security, like antivirus and other tools that can detect and actually prevent ransomware, right? The actual encryption, and they do it through a bunch of different pretty innovative ways. But they're really not a great way to keep people from from copying your data like that. And so while I anticipate the ability for us to to prevent unauthorized encryption of your data is going to continue to evolve, I think the hope for a technological solution, like a blanket solution to this problem is very unlikely to be forthcoming. Now, hey, look, hopefully somebody takes that as a challenge and goes and figures out a way to do this. But
you just want to sell you want us to buy another shiny black box with blinky lights, don't you?
Sure.
Isn't that what we just said is a problem?
No, I know. I'm just saying that it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. So you can't. I think many security leaders are able to sleep at night because they feel like they've solved their ransomware problem by buying into the marketing from whatever antivirus vendor
and or backups
yeah, right. And
but the game has changed again.
But the game has changed now.
Yeah.
And by the way, that hope they had, or that feeling of comfort they had, was probably misplaced, even without this recent development. But now you can't even have that, and arguably, this is as significant a problem as any. This is especially at this point in the history of IT, like we are at peak, almost I would say, peak privacy concern.
We're getting there.
Maybe not peak.
In the U.S., we're getting there.
Yeah,
I would say, which is good, by the way. I think. Where I think it really will play out is regulatory compliance issues when these things get leaked. You might have bigger issues when the government comes knocking with the big stick because you leaked PAI or whatever that shouldn't have been leaked.
Correct. And I do wonder, I know I've mentioned this before. Which,
if I just interrupt for a second, if I play that thought out, it's not necessarily your fault you got hacked and ransomware hit you unless you're failing to do the due diligence. So then it becomes a debate, what is the appropriate level of due diligence? And you still got hacked. Well, then that's not your fault, per se, right? Because it's like somebody breaking into your shop. It's not your fault, but did you put up the bars that your insurance company wanted you to put up, or whatever? There's going to, I still think, be this ultimately probably some, and it'll probably suck, but some level of acceptable due diligence and acceptable level of defense that over and above you're no longer culpable. Much like we're kind of seeing now, well, if a nation state came after you, well, that's clearly not your fault,
right?
Kind of thing.
Hey, boy. In general, there are no safe harbors, right? That if you get hacked, clearly you failed. You didn't have the right controls in place, and that's a real problem for things like GDPR. And I know a lot of organizations still kind of struggle with this. And what I've seen, it's driven some, in my view, kind of weird behavior. There's an assumption on the part of many organizations that if you do something like have you get an ISO 27000 attestation, that will demonstrate, if something bad happens, that'll demonstrate to a regulator that you put in the right level of diligence. But that's totally speculative. There hasn't been played out in court yet. We don't really know how that's going to be viewed, or if it'll make a darn bit of difference. Now, having said that, I think that many organizations do benefit from going through that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily a wasted effort, but I think it's quite likely not going to be the get out of jail free card that I think a lot of organizations are hoping that it'll be. But over time, with our heightened acuity or heightened sense of focus on data privacy, we're going to have to. I mean, this is something that's going to have to be reckoned in the courts. And I know that different court systems, Europe versus the U.S. are going to be different, but I would anticipate that as the data privacy regulations in the U.S. continue to evolve, we're going to see some of that, that case law evolve on like what's enough.
It's going to happen. I think maybe California is kind of leading that charge right now, most likely.
Yep, with CCPA, that's right.
So it's tough. I mean, look, on one hand, I'm more libertarian than anything, so I'm not a big fan of government regulations. But if you're going to have government regulations, they need to be clear and concise, and so people know how to comply. I don't think we have that today. I think there's so much gray area that it makes it really difficult for companies to know how to comply.
Correct. And that, by the way, is a commonly levied complaint of the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission here in the U.S. And we've talked about that at length in the past. So there's just no guidance, no clear guidance. Just if you screw up, you were wrong. So anyway, that's I think we killed that one. All right, that's it. I have to go and help some kids with homework, college homework this time. So that's fun.
Good luck. And if you need help, Google it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what Stack Overflow is for, right? Or I should say Stack Exchange. Yeah. Anyway, thank you to all of our Patreon donors who have stuck with us. We've actually gotten a couple more in the past couple of weeks, so thank you all very much.
Awesome.
I know.
You guys rock. Thank you. I don't know if I always wonder if we should start calling people out by name, but then again they might want to be anonymous. So
yes,
but we know and we appreciate it, and I still am amazed that people give us money for our humble little show. So thank you.
Yeah, I at some point I would like to. We got to talk about this offline, but I want to figure out what we can do more for our donors. So I feel like we need to do something more for our donors.
Don't show up at their house. Trust me.
No, nothing like that. No.
The judge was very specific.
Yeah, I understand. All right. Have a good week, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, be well, and we'll talk soon.
Bye-bye. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye.